The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Revamp Your Resume webinar brought to you by your Vanderbilt Alumni Association. I'm Lauren Oberstead, Executive Director of Alumni and Student Engagement at Vanderbilt, and this webinar is just one resource of many that we provide to our alumni. So be sure to familiarize yourself with the additional services that we offer at vanderbilt.edu/alumni/career. Tiffany's webinar is the final live webinar in our monthly series this year, but stay tuned for the archived presentation and notice of future free webinars at buconnect.com/expert-advice. Today's webinar will be wrapped up within the hour, lasting around 45 minutes with time allotted for Q&A. Please feel free to type questions in the box as you see them on the side panel of your screen, and then in the interest of conserving time and fitting as much practical info in as possible, we'll address all your questions at the end. And now I'm pleased to introduce to you our resume expert. Tiffany Franklin is a career coach with over 16 years of experience, currently working as Associate Director of Career Services at an Ivy League institution, where she coaches both alumni and students, graduate and undergraduate, in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. She reviews resumes, cover letters, LinkedIn profiles. She conducts mock interviews, plans career fairs, coordinates an alumni externship program, and offers job search strategy advice, as well as negotiation techniques. In her prior role, Tiffany served as a tech recruiter for an international creative staffing agency. She sourced and interviewed candidates on behalf of Fortune 100 companies based in Silicon Valley, New York, Philadelphia, Austin, and Atlanta. In 2011, Tiffany launched a career consulting side business and has helped over 200 clients, ranging from recent grads to executives with more than 30 years of experience. Some of you may remember Tiffany from her 7 years as a career coach with us at the Vanderbilt Center for Student Professional Development. She also served in the Career Management Center of Drexel University after earning her BA here in psychology and her MS Ed from the University of Penn with a concentration in counseling. She currently provides discounted alumni services in the coaching area, and you can see that on our website as well. Tiffany, we're so excited to have you here today, and take it away.
Thanks, Lauren. I'm so happy to be able to help everybody today and go through this. So let's dive in. Some of the topics we're going to cover are the role of the resume in your job search. We want to tie this into personal branding since that is so important and encompasses social media. What are your career goals? Let's take a look at your current resume and see how that's working for you, and then we're going to go into the elements of a great resume. We'll talk about the different types of resumes and then go through section by section how you can make it the most effective for your goals. I'm going to give you the recruiter's perspective for each section, and we're basically going to be like your old writing teacher told you, show, don't tell. That's what's so important. We have to demonstrate your impact. We're going to talk about how to adapt it to your audience since it's so important to tailor your resume. There's no one size fits all. And then finally we'll talk about ethics and a few final thoughts. So what is the role of the resume in the job search? Basically when it comes down to it, it's your resume that gets you the interview and the interview that gets you the job offer. So when you're talking about your personal brand, we want to make sure that there's consistency between resume and LinkedIn profile. And that really comes down to dates, company names, degrees. When I was recruiting, I'd often see candidates who they had jobs on their LinkedIn that weren't on their resume, and they would have different months and years sometimes. And I realized there's only so much room on your resume and you can put more on LinkedIn, but it just seemed odd that there would be those discrepancies. So be careful about that, and also think about what are the key skills that you want to be known for. If you look at your resume for 5 seconds, which is often what recruiters will spend on them, then what are the key takeaways that they will see that this person is an expert in this? You want to make sure that your resume conveys your expertise, because when it comes down to it, your personal brand is the intersection of how you see yourself and how others see you. So what are your career goals? Does your resume tell the story you want given those career goals? And it can be very different if you're just trying to go to the next level in your career and get that promotion versus if you're completely changing careers and need to pull out a bunch of transferable skills. Also, you need to think, are you going to use this resume for an online application? If so, you may want to get another version in rich text format, take out a lot of the formatting so you can easily divide it up and cut it and paste it. Are you looking at an internal promotion where you're going to be giving it to people that you've been working for multiple years? Are you mass distributing them at a career fair so you're maybe not tailoring it to the same extent you usually would for a specific job? Are you going to a general networking event or handing it to a friend who's going to send it to their HR director? While it's all the same, you are the same person, there could be little nuances that you could change for those to make it most effective. So let's take a look at your current resume. First of all, how's it been doing so far? How many interviews have you gotten from it? And also we want to talk about page length. Everybody always asks me about that. Pretty much, if you've got under 5 years of experience and are a new grad, you want to keep it 1 page. Unless you've been a teacher or there are a few other exceptions, sometimes project managers just need more space, it depends. But for most job seekers who've been out in the working world over 5 years, 2 to 3 pages is acceptable. Now when it comes down to academic CVs, those are definitely longer, or international ones for other countries. Basically, give yourself, like I said, the 5-second test. If you just peruse it very quickly, and I used to think that was so awful that recruiters would only spend 5 seconds of this, when I had spent a really long time. But then once I was out there, I would post a job on LinkedIn because I found they have some great candidates there. And I would put them in on Indeed and other niche sites as well. But I would get 100 applicants over the weekend. And then by Tuesday afternoon, I had to go through and pick 3 of the top candidates from those and interview those people and send them to my corporate client, who at the time was Comcast. So suddenly those 5 seconds meant a lot, and it was amazing how my eyes would go to mistakes. I could see if they were really being accomplishment-oriented and little things like that, which when you have to eliminate 97, that helps you. Other things to keep in mind. Do you use white space effectively? You definitely want to leave a little bit of room so you're directing their eye, because sometimes if things are too crammed or you have these huge long paragraphs, it's almost like your eyes start screaming like, oh my gosh, that's too much. So make sure that what you do have stands out. Are you consistent with your formatting, with where the dates are, with, are you talking about the dates in terms of months, or some people do seasons? I recommend months because life doesn't always neatly fit into seasons, although I think that's more of a new grad thing. Let's see. So next, let's talk about what makes a great resume. First, you want it to be clearly formatted. Quantify whenever possible to demonstrate your impact. What you're trying to do is show the scope of your job. Again, if I'm comparing 20 different candidates, the ones who quantify can give me an idea of exactly the extent of what they touched. It really demonstrates that impact. And it's not just a listing of the duties. I want to see your accomplishment. The duties can be helpful as far as, okay, what did it entail? But, how did you leave your organization a better place? And again, that tailoring to each job. What that may mean is, in some cases, old jobs that you had may be more relevant to what you're doing now than your current job, or what you want to do than your current job. So you can play with your section headings. For example, I could say consulting experience and then pull up things I've done throughout the years. Or when I was a recruiter and then I wanted to go back to academia, I went and put higher education experience and then put my Vanderbilt job first. And then I put my recruiting job in another section later in the resume. So there's all kinds of ways. It just has to be from most recent to further back or reverse chronological within each section. I'll show you some examples so it'll bring home that point. When asking yourself, I talked about you want to keep it 1 to 3 pages. Sometimes that can be really tough. So what I recommend is like a resume buffet. Have a long version where you format it perfectly, have everything you've ever done, and then for each job to which you apply, You want to tailor it. So you're going to ask yourself, what are the 3 key things that they're looking for? Job descriptions routinely have 50 to 100 different things that they say they want. I mean, usually no perfect person has that, or if they do, you should probably be applying to something else because you're overqualified. But when it comes down to it, you can probably group those categories into a few different things. So maybe it's leadership, maybe it's research. It could be specific, do they want computer skills? Do they want Python or Ruby on Rails? Or is it more of a problem-solving thing? So when you figure out what are those 3 or 4 categories, then when trying to decide what stuff to take off your resume, look at each thing for, is it relevant, is it recent, and were you deeply involved? You don't have to have all 3 of those, but I usually, if something's going to stay on my resume, if I don't have space for it otherwise, I want to make sure it's at least 2 of the 3. And again, you want to use strong action verbs. Resume writing is different than kind of flowy prose. We want it to be grammatically correct, but you can start with strong action verbs because you're helping the recruiter visualize you in action. And so I highly recommend you Google one of those verb lists that are out there. You can say strong resume action verbs, and a bunch of them will come up. And you want to vary your verbs because you don't want to use the same verb multiple times within one job. It just kind of dilutes your impact. So what are the types of resumes? The most common is the reverse chronological, where it's basically what are you doing now, and then it goes backwards. It's really helpful for recruiters to see your career progression. Hybrids, or for more experienced candidates who maybe they need to highlight 3 to 4 key skill areas from across their career, and they're going to take bits and pieces from everything that they've done. So in that one, you'd have a career summary, and then maybe selected achievements where you highlight those 4 areas, and I've got a sample I'm going to show you later, and then you go into your experience. And then finally, there's skills-based or functional. These are least common, and in a lot of times people don't always put the dates with those. They'll just put skills-based. And for me, as a recruiter, it used to be like being in the forest without a flashlight or a compass or anything. It was a little confusing to follow, and it was like, what is the candidate trying to hide? And it may be a completely unfair assessment. Maybe just somebody told them to format their resume like that, but it just didn't seem as productive as the others. So the template trap. I see sometimes when I'm doing my side business or even working with students where people have these, from a distance they look fantastic. You know, it's charts and graphs, or it's, you know, all these specific fonts and all, but then once you get into it, it's so limiting. What happens is it constrains your content, and you really don't have control of your space. Tables, they don't scan correctly, and that's the problem with a lot of those templates. People start almost making their format dictate their content when it should be the other way around. So what's the alternative? Just type into a Word document. I recommend about 1/2-inch margins or narrow all around so you can get in as much as possible. Don't go lower than that though, because it may not scan correctly. 10 to 12 point font, I would use all the same size. Sometimes people will do their headings bigger, and I don't know, I don't really think that's necessary. If you do underlining in the right way or selectively do all caps, you don't really need that. Just, you can do your name in 14 or 16 point font, that's fine. And select just one font. Make sure it's common, like New Times Roman, Calibri, Arial, or Arial, Cambria, Georgia, that type of thing. And then, you know, and in a way you can almost create your own template. That's what I've done with this resume starter page. Basically, I have the full name, the address, phone number, email. One thing, I wouldn't put multiple emails on there. It just increases the chance that you could miss a message. So just put your most recent email, the one you check most often, and make sure it's nothing cutesy in the address. You want to be as professional as possible. I put the LinkedIn profile right there and hyperlinked it. I do recommend actually customizing that URL, so then you can just go ahead and actually put the www.linkedin, and then it'll have your name. And I have a QR code. The reason I did that, I saw it a few years ago on some of my clients from Silicon Valley, and I think it's kind of a nice way visually where if they have the QR code reader with their phone, they can scan it and it goes right to your LinkedIn. It makes it stand out, but it's not overly gimmicky or cutesy or anything like that. And then you can see the different sections I have. So career summary, key skills, employment experience, education, professional development for courses you've taken and show how you're continually learning, may have volunteer experience there, certifications, computer skills. These are by no means all comprehensive. I sometimes add different ones, but this is just the ones I usually use. So career summaries. For people that are just graduating, I don't use these because there's really no need. We're going to highlight your education front and center. But for adults who've been out for at least, I think, 2 or 3 years, a career summary is a nice way to basically take things and tell them the lens through which you want them to view your resume. It's almost like opening arguments in a court case. You're setting it up for them. So I limit it to under 6 lines and a few key takeaway bullets. I basically will make sure I bring home the top skills in the job description, of course making sure that I actually have those, and then I mention key points on the second page that maybe I need to highlight. So once you've been out a while, your education is going to go all the way to the bottom, but I don't want to leave that stuck on the second page, so I'll mention it in the career summary and then later. Sometimes people ask about the repetition, but I think that's fine in that case because what you're trying to do is get your resume ready for multiple things. So if it's an applicant tracking database that's by keywords, some of the repetition is good. And then as we know, recruiters spend that 5 seconds on your resume, so if they miss it in the career summary, they'll see it later. You're just hedging your bets. So here's a sample summary, and basically we're getting in that MBA right there, talking about the years of experience. Usually I focus anywhere in the 20 to about 5 to 20 years experience. If you've had like 30 years of experience, I would just say over 20. And then as far as, we go into what are some of the things that they've done. You can see there's some numbers in here. I don't always quantify in the summary, but if there's something that would be meaningful, then you can go ahead and do so. Talk about some of the leading staff, partnering with stakeholders, and then, I have proven analytical skills. Well, we're going to be sure to, down further in the resume, actually have the data to back that up. And then also we're going to say seeking, now this was a healthcare management position. I would go ahead and actually tailor that last line and have the specific job title and then the specific company. So that way you really tailor it to every job to which you apply. Unless you're at a career fair, then you can do something more general like this. Here's another sample. Actually, this is from my own. I actually am using my own resume a lot in this because I value the confidentiality of all my clients, and I didn't want to have anything that could give away some of their work. So this was when I was applying to Penn. I was talking about the years of experience that I had, and then I talked about leading high-performing teams, the different fields industries that I've had experience, and then you can see I took a few bullets. There's the education one where I talk about some of my key clients that I had through my side business. I talk about what I did at Vanderbilt because that's relevant to the current job that I have, program management, and then I speak to some supervision that I did a while ago. So next section is key skills. These are basically the top skills listed in the job description that you want to demonstrate elsewhere in the resume. Even though it's just a listing of the skills, I think it can be valuable because, again, when you're looking at a huge stack of resumes, they all start to look the same. And so if you see somebody, like oftentimes when I would look for candidates, I was doing some high-tech recruiting, but I was looking for, did they have Ruby or did they have certain computer skills? So I would search on that. So it's nice to see right in the beginning, oh, there it is. I know I'm going to go see that in action. One great trick is to look to your skills in your LinkedIn profile for some ideas. And then, again, this is helpful for those applicant tracking databases. So here are two examples of different key skills sections that I've done before. You can see a little bit of all over the place, but there are some trends in there. So you can see the top one is very much about product plans, planning, merchandising, so kind of marketing and product development, but we also put leadership and hiring in there. And then the second one kind of goes more of a healthcare one, and they did some HR functions, but then they also were doing some, clinical care and effectiveness as well. So here's that LinkedIn sample that I told you about. This is from my own, but you can go through and see what are some of the key ones that really go to the top. I know one time somebody asked about that when I was at Vanderbilt, and we had LinkedIn come out to us, and somebody had said, people just go click a button. Do they really know that I know this? But what they said, they made a good point, is that if you look at it across the board, the ones that go to the top tend to be the ones of which you really are skilled in. And I would say, looking at these for myself, it really is accurate in that case. So now the meat of the resume, the employment experience. This is the one where you want to include company name, title, your experience in terms of month year to month year, or to present if you're still doing it, location. In some cases you'll put your department on there. Actually, a lot of cases that's really helpful. All of this orients the recruiter. Again, start with those strong action verbs. Quantify. When I talk about that a lot, that'll be a theme. One of the ways to do so is ask yourself, can you answer the questions? How much? How many? How often? So how much money did you save the department? How big was the budget that you managed? How many people did you supervise? How big was the company? If you're doing IT for them, then how many members were there? Did percentages on surveys go up or down? And that's how you can back up those claims. And one thing I like to do, if it works out for my formatting, I try and do an achievement section under each job. It's optional, but it's kind of those couple takeaway items, and I really put the numbers there. So if the recruiter's looking at your resume and they scan down, that'll be where their eye goes, so they see your impact immediately. I also do whatever I can not to cut a job between two different pages. So that's where that key skills section can be helpful, because sometimes it's a space filler that I'll put that right under the key summary, or the summary in the beginning, and then I'll get one or two major jobs on the front. But if the key skills is making me break up my other jobs, then I'll put that on the second page. So those are just little tricks I use. So here's the sample right now where you can see company name. You don't have to format it exactly like this. I have found that this works for me. As you can see, I have, they're the VP, what area, and then go through, have strong verbs like spearheaded, reconstructed, developed, and then under the achievements, it takes it to that other level where it's, talking about that 20% increase, generating over 12 million in pledges, and then we talk about with the book some of their sales. Here's another example. Again, this was from my side business, and as you could see, that executive coaching entrepreneurial experience. That's where I was getting a little creative with my headings, and I wanted to put this somewhere different than all of my experience that you see on my LinkedIn, but I still wanted it to be there. And so that's why I put it a little bit lower in the resume, because again, with reverse chronological, if something's to present, it needs to go at the very top. And for the job that I was doing at the time, I wanted all my university experience to go at the top. Okay, professional development. So these are continuing education classes. It could be conferences attended, credits for certifications, even online courses like Coursera. I went to Google this summer as part of my day job, and we were talking to them about what they look in students. And they want to see people who are very passionate. If people have been doing hackathons on their own, or if they've developed an app, it may not be through a specific organization, but that demonstrates a lot of initiative. So everything you've ever been doing goes into your story. That includes volunteer experience. That includes, class projects, work projects, board memberships. All of this matters, and that's why, again, you have that resume buffet of all of it together, and then you pick the most salient things for each job. So here's an example of professional development. I try and keep these a little more brief, so we just, put the name, the title, and the dates, although in some cases, if you are super involved and that's where a lot of your transferable skills are coming from, then by all means, format them just like any other job. Education. So this is pretty straightforward. School name, location, month and year graduated. However, if you graduated prior to the mid-'80s, I probably would leave it off. Again, not that it's right, those hiring decisions should never be made on that, but I just figure let's just focus on your past 20 years and the impact you've done now. They don't really need to, they can probably figure out, but hey, that doesn't need to be on there. If you didn't graduate, then go ahead and just put the date ranges. I would list the most recent degree first. So if you're MBA, if you got your PhD or other graduate degree, so reverse chronological order. Include GPA of over 3.0 and a recent grad. If you had a rockstar GPA, of course you can put it on there even if it's been 20 years, but it's just not as important as it is that first year or two. And then you can go ahead and put college activities. They're optional. Are they relevant? So for instance, you may have, some, sports. You may have fraternity sororities, volunteer organizations that could go under volunteer organizations, or they could just be aligned under your college. Again, do you have room for this? If you've studied abroad, I would definitely mention that, even if it was years ago. Global experience and that perspective is so important across industries today, so I think that's a nice piece. Here's some samples. This was from mine, so this was one version of my resume where I kept it just very short and sweet at the very end, and then I do have other versions where I put my GPA, so here's somebody else's that has their GPAs on there. One thing we always say with GPAs, put it to the decimal point, don't round or anything. They can look at your transcripts. Even though it may be like 1/100th of a decimal point, it's just not worth it to round up when it comes to that stuff. So technology skills. This is listing software programs that you know. Now, if you're really deep in IT, then I don't think you necessarily have to put Microsoft Office on there. But I think, or if you're a coder, but for everybody else, yes, go ahead and put it on. I know it may be obvious, but for some of the job descriptions, the keywords they're looking for could be Excel, or it could be PowerPoint, and you don't want to make the mistake of thinking it was so obvious that they're going to assume. They only know what you tell them. If it's the technical positions, be sure to include languages, hardware. Also, if you know HTML5, be sure to specify that, because again, when I was looking for information architects, I was always looking for HTML5, and HTML just wasn't enough. For marketing, communications, sales, entertainment, media, or PR roles, I would add social media programs like LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, put it on there, Facebook, because that may be a key component of the job. For everybody else, I don't think you need to put Facebook on there. So here are two samples. The one shows just a kind of a quick little listing of Microsoft programs and some other applications, where the second one shows when you start to get a little more advanced and descriptive. Now, additional sections. We could have volunteer experience, like I said, board memberships, certifications, or like bar memberships, medical licensure. I would definitely put that on there. Languages. With the languages, make sure if you put it on there that it's something that you are fluent or very proficient, that you could use it in a business context. If you took it years ago and haven't spoken a word since, then I wouldn't worry about that. Interest. It can be nice to hear that you like marathons and cooking, but the thing is, it's not, in most jobs, it's not really going to be relevant. It may speak to organizational fit if you're, in a healthcare company or something, but basically look at, when you're telling your story, do you have room for that? I almost look like a resume, like oceanfront property. If you're going to put something on it, you want it to be good. So if you're going to take out something really important to put interest there, then it may not be worth it. But otherwise, it could add a nice line or two. So here's an example of additional sections: volunteer experience, languages. By the way, if your resume is in English, I really don't think you need to put fluent in English if English is not your first language. I think sometimes that may make a recruiter wonder, like, isn't that just a given? So now here's one example where I did put intermediate knowledge of Italian, but the reason I did that was because the job the person was looking at, they needed some reading of it, but it wasn't anything huge. So we threw it in because we wanted to be completely transparent. Now the hybrid resume. Again, I alluded to that earlier, where it's this selected achievements section listed on the first page under Career Summary, and it's before you start doing that reverse chronological listing of your experience. Again, this is great for job changers, or if you're trying to maybe take a leap in your career and you have these few key skills that maybe if they just read your resume in a reverse order aren't totally apparent that that's the main things you bring to the table, then this is a way to say to them, here. Because what we want to do is make sure in your resume, it's not one of those where, okay, here's everything I've ever done, let me just throw it at you and please like me. Instead, we want it to be there, here's the story, how everything I've ever been doing has been leading to this, and I am going to be able to hit the ground running. A resume is all about inspiring confidence. It's basically showing that you can do the job, you've done something like that in the past. We want to convey some passion and willingness to do the job, and then of course the interview is where they're going to figure out the fit. You want to give the reader a reference point and mention the job associated with each bullet, and then balance the length of this section with the first job. So here's a sample of that. The key skills are leadership. Then we decided that for the job this person was going for, marketing and sales management was important, and then business planning and development. So what we did is, again, like all the other bullets, they start with strong action verbs. There's quantification in there, and you'll notice that many of them, like for instance in that second section, marketing and sales management, the enhanced bullet at the end, it says during 5-year tenure as director of marketing at XYZ company. So that's how you orient them, and that's how you pull stuff from throughout your career and highlight it. But then right after, we go into that reverse chronological listing. Now in some cases there may be a little repetition between this, so you want to make sure that if you need to talk a little bit about some of those things below, that you're mixing your bullet around a little bit, using a different verb, so you're not having the same sentence appear twice on your resume. So again, that old adage from your English teacher, show, don't tell. As we've talked about throughout this presentation, quantify to bring the point home. Use the strong action verbs. And for when we're talking about interviewing, we often talk about these behavioral questions that are, tell me about a time when. What these people are looking for is that, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So what I often do is tell clients and students, structure your answers according to the CAR method. What was the challenge you encountered, the actions that you took, and the results? And in some ways, even though that's more of an interview technique, you really can ask yourself, is your resume conveying those actions and those results? In some cases, it may be helpful to outline the challenge too, but again, just make sure you're starting with that strong action verb. And again, are you merely listing duties, or are you getting across that essence of the role? How did you make it better than you found it? The power of tailoring. We're talking about that, adapting to your audience. People do that in marketing all the time. I mean, if you look at the commercials via when a game or, on ESPN, they're going to be a little bit different than the commercials you may see when cartoons are on, or when, daytime talk shows are on. So think about, who is it that you're sending it to? Use that job description as your guide. Again, that is going to be what are the main skills that they are looking for. And have a version for each industry. I know many people that do a concurrent search. So they may have a consulting job search going, so they do different clients on the side, but then they may be going back to their investment banking position. Or, it could be somebody trying to do a sales job, but then also doing marketing. And again, those are going to have some overlap, but there could be some nuances. You can omit unnecessary information, but you do want to account for time and show career progression. So what I'll often do is, while I still want to be consistent, I may only have 2 bullets under my older jobs when I was first beginning, and then I put much longer ones for my current stuff. Again, those transferable skills go a long way. So here's a tailoring sample. This was mine, where, as you can see, the section heading, I have University Career Services and Alumni Outreach Experience, because the job, my current one that I was applying for, wanted me to have both of those. And so I went through, and this is another way where when you've been at the same company and then got promoted or went to a different type of job, how you can show what your first role was, what are some of the duties, what were the overall dates at Vanderbilt, and then I can show my specific dates within those jobs. And then at the bottom, I have achievements for both of those positions. You know, what was the thing that kind of brought it home? Here's another sample. This was, again, from my resume where I had said that recruiting experience I took. This was an old resume, so that's why it's still into present. But you can see where I was an agent recruiter. I had the different offices I was working with, how I sourced candidates, and then I talked about, it's a little shorter than the Vanderbilt one because it was important but not as important as the other thing. So referencing LinkedIn on your resume. Like I said, you want to customize your URL. If you just Google how to customize your URL on LinkedIn, it'll come up with some demonstrations. Include that on your resume and contact info, and then, like I said, consider adding that QR code. There's tons of free QR code generators out there. Just make sure you do the static one to get it free, otherwise they'll try and sign you up for a membership. So here's a sample on my resume where I have the extended link for LinkedIn, and then I have the actual QR code. So ethics in your resume, just, you know, some parting thoughts here. Always remain accurate with your degrees, dates, accomplishments. It's just so easy to find discrepancies in standard background checks and online searches. And even though you may have the best of intentions and not think it's a big deal, you just don't want anything to call into question. Quantify your accomplishments, but don't embellish. And, you know, if you have something like, if the number when you quantify is under 10, I wouldn't really worry about it. Unless we're talking, you know, like a major year-long project and you've done 2 or 3 of those, then that's a different story. If you've worked in a team, then it's great to talk about collaboration because everybody really likes that and looks for that today. Although you want to make sure that you specify what was your specific contribution. Make sure no discrepancies between titles and duties or the scope of your job. And, you know, I've heard over the years stories of people that if an inaccuracy was discovered, I'm sure you've seen some headlines, that, you know, it could lead to an offer being pulled even after a candidate starts. I don't think this would be anything with anybody here, but I always just have to talk about that. So some final thoughts. Keep updating your resume every few months, even while you're at your current job. You're going to get so busy that you're going to forget about all the great things that you're doing. Even if it's not, you know, in perfect format, just get it out there so then when it is time to job search, it's one less stressful thing to do. Have at least 2 other people read your resume for spot errors. I don't know about you, but on my own resume, I was looking at it, I think my brain would autocorrect. I'd have one of my editors go through and they'd find a space that was too big or something where, you know, sometimes spell check doesn't always pick up something. Like I said, consider that resume buffet method where you have the real long one and then you tailor it for each job. Just do save as. You can be somewhat creative with those heading titles. Always include a cover letter. So I've heard that, you know, they say, okay, some recruiters never read cover letters. And that's true. I think about 50% love them, 50% don't bother. Thing is, you don't know which 50% that recruiter is going to be in. So the reason I say is include a flawless cover letter, because why not? It's a way for you to pitch yourself. It shows how well you can communicate. It shows you took the extra time. Again, when I was looking at that stack of 100 resumes, when it came down to it, I needed certain skills. So even if somebody didn't have a cover letter, if they had this need, I may look at them. But if they had a cover letter, I knew that they went to the extra trouble to do that. They put my name on it, so they did some research, and they really, and it may have brought their resume to life. It wasn't just a regurgitation of it. It was taking it to that next level and really inspiring some confidence in me of, okay, they've done all these things before. They could do these with my team. Make sure your resume and LinkedIn match, as we talked about. So again, as Lauren mentioned, I have discounted rates for VU alumni, so please feel free to reach out to my tjfcareercoach@gmail.com to tell me what you're looking for, and I'll look at your resume and give you a quote tailored to the amount of work, or you can text my cell down there, and I can let you know how I usually do about 6 side projects a week, so I can let you know when I could start. Usually takes about a week, the process. I do LinkedIn profiles, resume overhauls, cover letters, but I also do strategy sessions, salary negotiation advice. I've worked across industries and across years of experience, so throw it at me and I will be happy to help you, and I really appreciate your time today and look forward to any questions.
Fantastic, Tiffany. I know this is a lot of information for everybody, and it's so valuable. Just a reminder, we will be archiving this and sending it out to all of you, so hopefully that helps with all your note-taking I'm sure you're doing. So we have a couple of fantastic questions here. To start with, a couple of people asked about how you address, if at all, gaps in your resume, like, for example, if you have a baby, or yeah, just any gaps that you have in your resume.
I think it depends on how long the gap is, but for the most part, that's where I tailor the section headings. So I might say relevant experience, or, and maybe do more of that hybrid resume like that. So you could break it up a little bit where it's still reverse chronological within each section, but you can show your, if it's marketing and sales experience, if it's consulting. And for a lot of people who have some gaps, sometimes they've done some consulting on the side, so don't forget to add that. And again, that can be more of an interview question where, I mean, life happens. You're supposed to have lives. It's okay. So you can talk about, I took some time off with my family, but here are ways that, I volunteered. If you volunteered at the school or did other board things, you can talk about that. If you helped out a friend with their business, little things to show. And if you truly just have a 20-year gap, then it's one of those things to show that, okay, I had this gap, but here are the continuing education classes that I have recently enrolled in. So maybe it was on Coursera that you went into something, or you even went to a local community college, took some of those courses. Just anything to show what you're doing to get back into it. You can even, not necessarily on your resume, but for your interview, make sure you're reading the Wall Street Journal every day, or the Business Journal for your community, and that you really have your hand on the pulse of what's going on now.
That's great. Several people had asked about significant volunteer activities. If you only have one main volunteer activity, would you put that under professional development section, or volunteer experience section, or community section?
It really doesn't matter so much where what the title is. I think it depends on how the spacing is going on your resume, so you don't have to divide a job across pages. I think it's fine to say volunteer experience, or in some cases it could be board membership if it's in the context of that. What makes the most sense for your story? There's not as much steadfast rules for that, but by all means, definitely include it on your resume.
Okay, great. Next question. How do I apply for positions that are not as senior as the one I'm currently in? Should I mask the senior level title to avoid seeming overqualified? I
see. Well, that kind of gets a little tricky. I think because again, you want to have exactly, what you've done. So, I mean, it's one of those things, if you had your own business, then yes, you can maybe call yourself a principal instead of like CEO or something like that. But at other companies, you want your title to be what your actual title is. So that comes down to, I think, in the career summary, talking about, after, 10 years of running my own business or running, of course, we're not going to have personal pronouns, but, running your own business, looking to return in a consulting capacity to Fortune 500 companies or something. Some of those I'd have to know the specific situation, but it's basically going to be having that bit in your cover letter about why you're ready to do this. It could also be going more into that hybrid section where we pull out the leadership, the marketing or something, and just have a good explanation as, why are you taking a step down? Is it because you want to reinvigorate yourself and go after another field, and this is the point of entry? Is it because you miss being on the front lines and you really, you want to go back from an administrative role to more of that touching more client type things or counseling? I mean, it depends on what your situation is.
Kind of dovetailing off of that, is there anything additionally you'd add if someone's asking how they demonstrate wanting to leave being a self-employed consultant to join a company again?
Okay, I have that all the time with my side clients, and basically in some cases they want to sell their company. In others they miss the challenge, they miss being in an organization. I routinely see people that own their own companies or do consulting go in and out of the workforce officially because, sometimes I think it's the grass is greener. When, you miss the stability and, the structure that you may have within the big companies, but then you love having that, control and being able to pick your own projects. So essentially it's showing that as a consultant, all the great things that you did, the client, keep it in terms of, what client services did you offer, what was your impact, and then, have you been studying like machine learning, or what was your like subject matter expertise, and then how can you bring this back to their particular company. So that's where tailoring comes into, because what you're trying to do is, even though this may not come across necessarily in the resume, it may be more of a cover letter thing, you want to understand what that company's pain point is and then be able to articulate how what you've been doing you're able to jump back in. So in some cases, with your well-rounded perspective from both being, with Fortune 500 or with, your own consulting, you can come back in here and you're not too close to it to then show them how to be more efficient.
Wonderful. I think you're also going to talk about tailoring for this as well, but someone's asking if you have a lot of varied experience in various roles and you kind of don't want to paint yourself in a corner by giving yourself a certain title, I think this will come into tailoring, right?
Right. So basically have different versions of your resume. So it's kind of the lens through which you want people to see it. So it's great that, you can be a Renaissance person, but don't try the one-size-fits-all resume because it's going to look too convoluted. So the ways that you tailor it are through that summary. You pick out a few different things, and then, maybe through some of the keywords. Maybe, and it's fine to have just the straight reverse chronological order on your resume, but again, a few of those key sentences up top can highlight, is it marketing, is it sales development, what did you do the same function across different industries, or were you in the same industry and you did multiple functions? So again, your resumes may not be completely different, but some small nuances in the ordering of your sections. Like for instance, I had a client today that on one for his consulting resume, I put his consulting work in the top section and I called it consulting experience. And he had been doing that for 5 years, and then I went into some of his other work, which some of it overlapped, and I put, additional professional experience. Whereas for his other one, he wanted to do sales. So on that one, I put his current role, and then, which was at a company, and then I went, or actually no, it was about 2 years ago, but we still put that first because it was most relevant, and then I put consulting at the bottom. I hope that clarifies it.
Absolutely. A few more technical questions as well. In personal cover letters, would you say dear first name or dear Mr. or Mrs. last name?
I would say dear Mr. or so dear Ms. period, and then the last name, and then a colon. And then be sure in the cover letters that you don't indent because it's a professional letter. But right above that, you know, it's like over in the top of the, you'll have your address, then you'll have the date, then you'll have the contact name, so Bonnie Smith, and then Bonnie's title, and then the company name, the company address, and then Dear Miss Smith. And people often ask, well, what if I don't have the recruiter's name? What I do is I will Google LinkedIn company name recruiter, LinkedIn company name HR director, and usually a handful of names come up. And then I'll make sure that the person is actually still working there. And then if there's more than one to pick from, who would make sense? Is it the person in headquarters? Am I applying to headquarters, or is it elsewhere? And one of the things you want to do with that is, you know, even if it's the wrong person, as long as they're still in HR at that company and it could make sense as to why you're putting it on there, that looks so much better than to whom it may concern. Because to whom it may concern just seems very form letterish, even if the rest of it's tailored. And for that first paragraph, you know, basically a cover letter's I love you, you love me, let's talk. So in the I love you part, look at their mission statement, look at their About Us page. Be able to articulate not just what they can do for you, but what can you do for them and why do you want to do it for them?
That's great advice. Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on personal websites? A lot of online job applications have a field for that.
I think they're great if you have the time to do it right. So, and also I think it depends on what your field is. If you're in graphic design, if you're in engineering or IT, then by all means it's going to be your calling card. When I was looking at graphic designers, people, a lot of times the companies would look at their websites and portfolios first, and then they would see if they fit. For everybody else, I don't think you have to have one just for the sake of having one. One of the things to keep in mind is that, you know, you're going to have to keep it up. You don't want it to be too personal. I mean, it can be a little more personal, but you don't want them seeing your vacation photos or anything like that. So ask yourself, does it make sense in telling your story and conveying what you've done? Now, if you're a product designer, by all means do that because that's a way to convey it.
I would agree, yes, online portfolios, something like that works very well.
Yeah.
Is it ever okay to say part-time, or do you have any tips on how to best present any part-time positions that you've had?
I think it depends. You know, if it was something like a summer job from when you were in college, then, you know, I don't really think you have to talk about it if you were a waitress or something like that. It's a filler job. But if it was a professional level job you were doing part-time, I mean, I think if you can do it one of two ways. You could either in parentheses after the title put part-time, or you could just incorporate, you know, 20 hours a week or something. But if you're doing over 20 hours a week, if it's 25 to 30, I wouldn't necessarily worry about specifying part-time. But if we're talking if it's maybe, you know, under 20, then that's fine to specify. I mean, again, they're looking at what skills, and that's where the quantifying comes into play, because you can still quantify what your impact was even on a part-time basis.
And if you're searching for part-time work, is there any special tip in how to present yourself for that or what you should convey in your resume or cover letter?
Well, if it's part-time work, I mean, if they're posting a part-time job, then they clearly are open to that. I mean, we have that, and, you know, every once in a while we'll have a position like that in offices that I've worked in. So I think essentially just mention, you know, you could put the job title and then part-time in parentheses when you're at the top of your cover letter where you're saying that's what you're applying to, or at that last line of your summary in the resume. So if they're posting it as part-time, that's fine. If it's a regular posting that doesn't specify part-time, I think that could get a little fuzzy, but most of, you know, the LinkedIns, the Indeeds, they show, you know, their search parameters for part-time, so you should be okay.
Okay, great. Someone has a question about their email address at the top of the resume. Does a Hotmail email address make me look less technically proficient than a Gmail?
Yes. I know, I wouldn't have thought that, but I must admit there were conversations we had last year when I was a recruiter, or I guess it was now about a year and a half ago, as recruiters, and we're like, yeah, Hotmail looks a little, it's kind of like the AOL, it's just, I hate to say it, but we have to keep up with the trends. It's not that Gmail is the only one out there, but Hotmail looks a little old school now.
Okay, and then another logistical question about verb tense in your current job versus your past job when you're tweaking your resume. Should the current job be in present tense but everything else in past tense?
That is correct, although I will say it's one of the rules that occasionally I do break a little bit. Because sometimes when you're describing what you've currently done, especially, like when I was at Vanderbilt and I was writing my resume and I had been there 7 years, it was hard to talk about stuff from 6 years ago in present tense. So basically to be perfectly within the rules of resumes, then yes. If it's to present, then you need the verbs to be to present tense. Sometimes the way I get around that is with that achievement section. So I'll keep, at the beginning, actually let me see if I can go back to that thing. Oh, actually here's where I did it, on that Aquent Creative Staffing. So I wrote this when I was still there. So I had to present and I had those different things of what I would do, my duties, but then in the achievements I put them in past tense. So that's one way to get around it.
Okay. Someone is asking a little bit more information about what Indeed is. Maybe you could just talk about what Indeed and Simply Hired are versus LinkedIn.
Right. So they are actually on job sites that it's like, when you used to see it in newspapers where they would have the listings of all the different jobs, it's just online, like another monster.com. Whereas, LinkedIn is more the social media site that also happens to have a jobs tab. Just like you should diversify your financial portfolio, diversify your search. So you don't want to have everything on one job site. The other thing is make sure that you use that advanced search feature on each of these job sites. So, put in the keywords, but also you can usually do some search agents or parameters on them where once you do a search for one type of job and you specify, level of experience, location, what you're looking for in terms of industry or function, then they can email you certain other ones that come up like that.
Okay, great. Another general question about how do you present yourself so that you try to avoid appearing overqualified. If you're trying to change industries and you might need to, start on a lower level in another industry, or you're afraid that they might look at your salary history and bump you out immediately. Any tips on that?
So usually what I do is I won't put the years for my education if that's the case. I'll really focus on the past 15 years of work experience, and what you can do is say relevant work experience or select it. Whenever I put a word like relevant or selected on my resume in a section heading, that's an indication that there's more, but this is what you're putting out. And then I think it goes back to it can be a IT executive with 15 years experience looking to transition to blankety blank, and then make sure you put a line about, usually there's something that's kind of those intermediate steps that you take. Was it a project that you worked on at work? Because, I had a client that, she was a data analyst, but then suddenly she started working with people who did coding, and she was so intrigued by it that she went to all these online courses, learned a bunch of computer languages, got herself put on a project with those people at work, and then suddenly she was able to internally get one of those positions when they came up because she got herself up to speed. Excuse me. So basically in those cases, you're going to show how maybe some of the things that you have been doing to get yourself there. And then on the cover letter, you really tell the story in a way that, why are you, or where does this passion come from, and, what are the steps that you're taking to get towards that.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your wonderful questions. And Tiffany, thank you for sharing your experience with us and expertise today, and for all of our attendees for participating. I urge you all to explore the coaching offerings of Tiffany and our other partners at, again, vuconnect.com/career coaching. If you need any extra one-on-one guidance, you can certainly hook up with a coach there and talk to them about their alumni discounts. Of course, you can also interact with your alumni peers within our official Vanderbilt Alumni LinkedIn group, which has over 17,000 alumni, and on VU Connect with more than 6,000 alumni career advisors there who have offered to be contacted for job and industry advice. Thanks again for joining us today, and thanks in advance for your feedback. I'll be sending a brief survey later today, and also will let you know when the presentation is archived within the next few days. We love hearing how we can continue to support you through life after Vanderbilt, and wish you the very best as you consider your next steps professionally and personally. So thank you so much, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.